Join us now for Let's Just Talk with Kathryn Raaker.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Let's Just Talk TV. Today we have a wonderful couple that have written a book that I'm very excited about. It's called Resurrect Your Dead Marriage by Dr. Reginald and Renea Morris. And you know, the interesting thing is that marriage problems, and even among Christians, marriages sometimes fail. And statistics even show that Christians are not very different from non-believers when it comes to how often they divorce. But our guests today say there is hope. They should know is their own 30-year-old marriage survived 3 separations and a contested divorce. They are here today to share with us. What they've learned and the biblical principles that God has given. We are so pleased to have them with us today, and it's a topic that millions of people want to know about and how to change it. Welcome to our show,
well, thank you for
Doctor.
having us.
Welcome
so
to
happy to be here.
Well, listen, you know, I was very fortunate that I've been through a few little things like that, and I have to say my second marriage, 48 years, just a few weeks ago. And
congratulations.
Yeah,
thank you
exactly.
so much. And you know, marriage is difficult anyhow, but I want to tell your story first because I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we do too, actually.
Now, if I know correctly, you were only 19?
Yes, when I asked her to marry, I was just turned 19 years old. When
Wow.
I asked her to marry me and went down the aisle and said, I do.
And you were how old?
I was 22.
So you were not a cougar, but you were
A little bit older.
yeah, a little older, right? And more mature?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Just a little
Maybe.
older. That much I can attest
Now,
to.
here's my question. He just gets out of high school, and you are out of college,
Yes,
right?
That's correct.
Yes.
And so what were you doing? I mean, you had a business. What happened? How did you actually physically make it financially at that age?
Well, at that time, we had a concept that
Right.
we do everything was better together. That was what we said.
Better together.
Better together. And in fact, a pastor of ours used to say, if you have nothing but 2 teeth in your mouth, they look better together. And that's where it all came from.
Oh, is that where it came? Okay.
And so literally we were, making a few dollars a day kind of things at the beginning of our lives. Trying
Where
to find
did you
work.
live? Where did you live?
Well, we were in Los Angeles, was a very expensive place to live.
Yes.
Kind of crazy, right?
Exactly. I hadn't gone to college, so the only kind
Right.
of jobs I could get were, temporary jobs or things like that. Even though she had graduated from college, the only kind of job she could get at the time was working at the bank. So we really had to start from zero.
Scratch.
There's nothing.
Right.
And, because we didn't have a lot of family help. There was no help at all from that scenario.
I know that experience myself.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So that's how we got together. And interesting in those times, that scrapping attitude of just
Right.
being able to just work together, make it happen. Those were actually great days for our marriage
Do you
at the time.
remember bologna sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly and all that kind of good stuff?
I also remember, now this is interesting, we remember that, and one of our kind of fantastic stories was going into Denny's and ordering the $1.99 platter and sharing it between the two of us with a glass of water. That
or
was
ketchup soup.
Oh, we had those. Oh boy, we used
But
to
especially he grew up in a large family. There were 8 of them.
And there were 7 of
Yes.
us.
And so when we went to Denny's, that was our night out kind of thing
Right.
for $1.99. So.
Right. And Denny's was our kind of favorite place too. Actually, Howard Johnson's.
Oh,
that was
yes.
another one, right?
Yes.
I can remember living on $35 with our 3 kids and going to the grocery store. That was bologna sandwiches. And my kids hate bologna today. I have to
Fried
tell
bologna
you.
is better.
Yeah,
Right.
fried bologna is much better. But, so you were married for the first 7 years.
Yeah.
Was it all happiness and roses and all that kind of good stuff?
Well, we went into the marriage thinking that we were going to have a happily ever after marriage.
Experience.
Right. And, of course, we only needed a little bit of time to transpire to realize that wasn't going to be the case.
Right.
But we really did live by that motto, is better together. And I think the first 5 years of our marriage were absolutely fantastic. It wasn't until the kids started coming and finance issues started becoming part of our lives, and
Right.
that's when things started to get a little tougher for us. And one of the things that I've discovered in all of this is, if you're spiritually immature,
Right.
it's going to be difficult for you to deal with the things that you have to deal with in life.
Exactly.
And we found ourselves in that kind of situation. And a lot of it also is based on fear. And that
Being a mommy for the first time?
Yeah, exactly.
Daddy for the first time?
Exactly. It's a lot. And we didn't have really good examples in
Right.
either one of our families to teach us what it was, what do we need to do and how do you need to handle this. So we really felt like we were, on an island by ourselves. And I think that first time that we separated, it was really out of just anger and frustration with the situations that we were in. It wasn't that I didn't love him anymore. I didn't necessarily want to, be with him for the rest of my life, but I felt like I needed a break,
Let me ask you a question. Did you find yourself going out and taking the car or whatever, and just to get away?
No, I did not do that.
Oh, you didn't?
And maybe
If
if
you
I
would
had
have done
done that.
See, I did that.
Yeah.
I would get so upset that I'd start crying, and I'd get in the car and drive down to the beach or wherever we were living, because that was an escape for me. And I needed that time, footprints in the stand, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
to be able to feel better. And I didn't think he said, "I love you very much." That bothered me.
Okay.
So did you do that with each other? Did you tell each other that you loved each
Yeah,
other
I think
a
at
lot?
that time, like in the first 7 years, I think the word "I love you" was easily coming off our lips. One of the things, but as she said, there was a buildup of changes in the marriage that we did not talk through. For example, and it's real easy in a marriage when you have residual damage. Like, for example, there was, when our son was born, when she was carrying our firstborn, the plan was we were going to move into this house because she had decided we couldn't live in an apartment anymore, because in Los Angeles it was a bad neighborhood kind of thing. So she wanted to live in a house. So it was great. We went out and we found this house. That she said we're going to buy it. The month that my son was born, she says, "Well, now I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom." Well, we just bought the house, honey. Okay. So how are we going to do?
We needed our income, right?
Yeah, we need your income. Remember that?
Right.
Remember the application you just filled out?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, we went through some things and we did get through that period.
Right.
But what ended up happening was there was things that we didn't really talk through and settle and put behind us. We just kept moving forward. That was the first 7 years of our relationship, was learning we taught ourselves to just keep moving forward. But the problem was that residual damage kept piling up in the
So
pan.
it was that you weren't talking things out. Like, for
Correct.
instance, what? Give us an example.
Well, the example about me wanting to be a stay-at-home mom, it would have been nice to have talked about that. I mean, we
Before
were married
it-
for almost 3 years before I had the first child.
Right.
And then you have at least 9 months before the child is born. We had plenty of time to have had conversations
And then
Right.
plan for that.
and plan
And
for it.
then work together. In
Right.
fact, that one issue actually lasted probably 10 years of our
Really?
marriage.
So you
Yeah.
were angry? Were you
Yes.
angry at him about it?
Yes.
But you never told him you were
Oh,
angry?
I did tell him.
Right. So
Right.
then, after that 7 years, who decided to leave?
I did.
You did.
I did.
Was it because of your frustration?
It was because of my frustration, and it was because of the fact that I had a tendency to just internalize, and I didn't talk, and we didn't communicate. And so it was an escape for me.
Wow. And so were you the person that talked all the time, and so she internalized, so she was quieter than you?
Yeah, so, my style of communication is I do a lot of talking. So that's very naturally.
Right,
But
right.
one of the things I always try to do is to try to, encourage her to talk. I try to have conversations. Okay, well, what do you think? The problem is she gets angry when I do that kind of communication.
Because
with her.
she thinks you're bugging her? Okay. So on that note, we're going to take a short little break. We're going to be right back. But where can people get the book? Can you tell us?
Yeah, so they can get the book at Amazon.com. It's available at most Christian bookstores. And also you can go to our website at divorceproof.org.
And we'll be right back on Kathryn Raaker's Let's Just Talk.
No more, it's none of my business.
No more, he didn't mean it.
No more, not my problem.
No more, she was flirting with him.
No more, she was asking for it.
No more, boys will be boys.
No more, I'll say something next time.
No more bystanding.
No more ignorance.
No more excuses.
No more.
We're back on Let's Just Talk TV. And marriage in itself is really not the easiest thing. It's not a bed of roses. Would you agree?
Oh,
Yes,
no.
definitely.
No roses.
Okay, so now we were talking about you leaving. Did it just come up like that?
Well, it's easy to say that now because so much time has transpired, but there was a buildup.
Right.
And it finally got to the point where I just said, I need a break. And fortunately, that separation didn't last very long.
How long?
It was about a month.
About a month. Who was missing who?
Okay, well, let me go back and
Oh,
say
good. I
something.
want
Because
you
you
to
knew
say
there was
that.
something to be
Right.
said here, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, first of all, it was very sudden. It literally happened.
Well,
What?
It was sudden and it happened, but in my mind, it was
Right.
not.
Okay, that's wonderful for her. Well, let's explain for all your viewers out
Right
there
here.
who
What
how it really happened. So-
Right. Two sides to every story.
Okay,
right?
so one Sunday morning we get up, the whole family gets in the car, we go to church, right?
Right.
So there we are. My wife's in the choir. So wife's
Really?
up in the, so she's in the choir. I'm sitting in the audience, and I see her up on the in the choir stand, and then sort of there comes a time in the sermon where she's no longer on the stand. So I'm sitting there waiting for the service. The service ends and everything. So I decided to go back to the children's area to find pick up my kids like I normally do every Sunday. My
Right.
kids are no longer there,
And the wife?
and the wife is no longer there. And so I'm going, okay, well, maybe, she checked them out already. And so I do this whole, for 2 hours, I'm running
You're
around
running
the church,
around the church trying to
looking for
find
my
her.
kids and my wife.
Right.
So literally, people are leaving time after time. So after 2 hours, the pastor finally comes over and says, brother, they're gone. Okay? And so I'm like, okay, what do you mean they're gone? Did they disappear or whatever the case?
Right.
So what happened after that is, so I went through a whole 24-hour period not hearing from them. You can imagine I
Well, I
was.
can imagine you were
Yeah.
scared to death.
Yeah, because I didn't know if something had physically happened to them or anything
Right.
else. So the next day I got a phone call from her, and that's when she told me she was leaving me and she had taken the kids and the whole works. So
I'm not proud of that.
Did you call the police? Were you that worried?
well, actually, there's another part of that story where the police showed up at my door.
Oh, they did?
Yes, they did.
Really?
Yeah. So that was the other thing. The police came and they handed me a restraining order, which
Restraining order?
Yeah. So it had gotten really dramatic here.
Really?
And so so all of a sudden I found myself without my wife, without my kids, restraining order, court date, the whole works. Which it's like there was no conversation whatsoever that had occurred. And so when I had to, I'm dumbfounded here. What's really
Were you
going on?
crying a lot?
That first day, yes.
Right.
The first day I went through a complete, tear down of everything else. But what happened after that, of course, I did like most people, which is I contacted my family and friends and say, what do you think? And, I was telling them what my woes, right? And I'll never forget when my mother was like, oh, son, you're young. You'll get over this, come on home. Because I was living by this time in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, you
And,
were?
yeah, so we were
You
no longer.
moved?
We moved from California to Phoenix, Arizona. And so she said, just come on back home. And that's when, for some reason, that just didn't sit well with me.
Moving
Because,
back with your mom, you mean?
well, not only just moving back with my mom, but just ending my life with my family, surrendering everything and going home.
That's
No.
tough to do, I can tell you. When they asked me to do that when I was divorced, and I was in Florida and they were in Cincinnati, I said, no way, I don't care. That's the way it is.
Right.
You want your independence. But you had nowhere else to go at the time.
I was at that particular time, I was out of work.
And how old were you?
So I would have been 26 at this time. Okay? So, it was a very tough scenario to do. And so but once again, that's when I first began the whole process of began my spiritual walk of really going to the Lord with my daily issues or, things in my life. And that's when I asked, I gotten a book that someone had provided to me earlier, but I never read, we all get those books.
Right.
I pulled it out, I started to read it, and it happened to be about marriage. I called this lawyer, and I'll never forget this. This guy called this lawyer, and I said, oh, well, my wife has left me, she wants a divorce, and da-da-da-da-da. He said, well, do you love her? I said, of course I love her. But she said, you didn't hear me. I said, she wants a divorce, and I went down the whole path again. He's like, wait a second. I think you need to go and ask God what it is you want in this whole thing. So with the book, that encouragement, I started looking inward and started asking God what to do. And he gave me a very simple equation. He said, stop thinking of her as your wife. Think about becoming her friend.
Right. And you weren't, I want to ask that question right there.
Yeah.
Were you friends first, and then lovers second, and then married people third?
I'm gonna ask.
Go ahead, tell me.
I would say that our relationship was more of a whirlwind, and so I don't know if we had those demarcations as separate as we could have had. We probably could have become friends and stayed friends longer before we got married. And
How long was it before you got married?
it was about a year.
There was a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a long time for me because it was only 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
what it
The
was.
3 weeks I heard is.
It's a real short
I guess
period
that
of
would
time.
be called a whirlwind.
That's
Now-
kind
now,
of a
if,
whirlwind.
from my perspective, I think we were friends. Yes, we had a real quick get-together relationship. It was a long-distance relationship first.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh
You
yeah,
didn't
so
tell me
I was
that
in
part.
Los Angeles. She was in Chicago. We had met at a conference here in Cincinnati, but we went back to our separate homes. We did some communication for about 6 months.
Those
and
are
then,
the days when you had to pay for long distance.
and then one day
That's
she
tough.
calls me and says, when I'm in Los Angeles, says, I'm coming out to visit you, and I want to see if this thing we got is real. And I'm like, okay. Now, listen,
You're a teddy bear.
yeah, so I'm like, I'm a guy who's 18 years old, and I have a woman who's a little older than me thinking about coming out to see me on an airplane.
That must
ticket.
have been a really big deal for you.
Yeah, so
Really?
I had one thing on my mind at that
Yeah,
time.
like,
Let's
whoa.
be honest.
Yeah, that's true. You were a young stud.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I
Whatever.
wanted to meet his
And you were the
family.
cougar.
So when she came, there wasn't this idea of getting married. It wasn't.
Was it in her mind?
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't in her mind. It wasn't in my mind at all.
Right.
But the interesting thing occurred when she literally got off the plane, and she was in the airport. So at that time, you used to be able to go to, the gate. Well, I couldn't go to the gate because I missed her. So
no.
she had by this time gone to the
Baggage
baggage claim.
And I bet you were freaking out, going like, is he there?
Yeah, I had no idea if he was going to show up.
When I showed up at baggage claim, I had this open vision, which I actually saw her many years down the future in my life. And I saw my life as good and wonderful, and all
Right.
these wonderful things was going to come out of this
Right.
relationship. And so literally when the vision ended, I blurted out, well, will you marry me?
At the airport?
At the airport, in the baggage claim, and her back was toward me. So she wasn't like facing me either.
Oh, God.
And interestingly enough, I turned around.
You said, who's talking to me back there? Right? It's like those new things, where they do that dance and everything. I don't know what it's called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like, do you know what I'm talking about? They actually, they plan this thing and they have a crowd dance. They have a crowd
Okay.
thing, and people really shock each other when they do that. You know
Oh,
what I'm
yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah.
about?
I know you'd like the shocking dance. So, like,
Oh,
it'll
like
be
the mob.
the mob dance.
the
Mob
mob.
dance.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So-
Flash mob.
Flash mob.
Flash mob.
That's what it reminds me of, and you're
Right.
doing this, and back then it was a little bit different. That was a shocker. Was it a shocker for you when you heard that?
It was a shocker for me, but my immediate reaction was yes.
It was?
I said
That's
yes.
even funnier.
I said yes.
Right.
So all of a sudden, so she turns around, she says yes, and in my mind, I was like, "Oh crap, what do I do now?" I wasn't expecting that, So it was like, it was like, okay, we're engaged now,
right. You're
and that's how it all
engaged.
started.
That's how it all started. And when you look back on all the years, now you've been married 30 years.
Yes.
That's so romantic when you think about it. Really, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget when my husband asked me to marry him. And it was, like we went out on this one date towards after about a week. And I heard this song, and I was away from home, and I heard this daddy song, and I started crying. He said, "What are you crying for?" Well, he had just said to me, "We'll see you sometime," or something like that. I thought, well, that's the end of this.
Yes.
Then I started crying. He said, "What are you crying for?" But on that note, we need to take a short break, and we'll be right back on Kathryn Raaker's Let's Just Talk with Dr. Reginald and Renea Morris and their new book, Resurrect Your Dead Marriage. I love the title. It's really wild. We'll see you in just a second.
Calls me googly eyes.
You know you're beautiful, right? You know that?
Even you're beautiful. I got bullied for wearing glasses. Share if you're against bullying.
We put it out there, just took off. 3 million people have shared this post. Don't let bullies get you down. I stand with you. Our whole family's wearing glasses. I wear glasses and I'm proud.
I even have the army on my team.
All the kind comments brought my child joy. I don't feel thank you is enough.
Next.
We're back with Dr. Reginald and Renea Morris and their new book, Resurrect Your Dead Marriage. Who came up with the title?
He came up with the title, and it was what happened to our marriage because it really died. And what occurred was really in one day, the Lord brought it back to life. And the name fits what exactly happened.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily take credit for that name, the name the Lord gave me, because that's exactly, she said, that's exactly what occurred. What we ended up discovering through our process was that in the Word of God, there is not only marriage, reconciliation, you heard of marriage restoration, which are both different works, but there is a work called marriage restoration. It's an active work.
Resurrection.
Oh, did I say it wrong? Thank you.
You did.
Marriage resurrection. She has to. Sometimes the tongue doesn't work. But my point here is that in a day, if your marriage is in crisis, you end up having one of the spouses decided not to engage in the marriage, stay married, or they decided to fall in love with someone else. What the Lord told me, because that's what we found ourselves. Actually, that's where I find myself in our relationship, in this third separation that actually that led through this contested divorce, that there is hope, because in His Word, when we went down that altar, there was 3 of us down at that altar. It wasn't 2 of us. And even though she might have, decided to move on, as long as I was willing to stay in covenant with Him, there was hope to bring that whole thing back and bring her back home and to restore the marriage in a way that has never been before.
And I think the hope for other people is the fact that if you do have Christ in your relationship and one of you decides that you want to go another way, you still have 2/3 of that relationship that's intact.
Yeah.
And that's a majority.
Do you think that today people really don't give their marriage a chance, number one? And number two, do they do what you have done?
Well, so the first question, absolutely, I think what's happening is too many people are bailing out way too soon, and they're also misinterpreting what's really occurring. Okay.
Right.
And so as a result of that, we're using our own reasoning and understanding to try to figure out what to do with our lives instead of going to God and letting Him direct your path, as He said in His Word. So that absolutely, that's the first thing.
Well, and remember I talked about the fact that spiritual immaturity is what leads you to having these issues, but it's also self-preservation.
Right.
Because if you're constantly thinking about yourself and you're not thinking about the other person, you're going to make decisions that probably will not include the two of you in your decision making.
And you also had to think about the kids.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And the kids were a very major factor in your lives.
Right.
So how did they react to it all? That's my question.
Well, the first thing, one of the things, after we got back together and the Lord had us go down this path of writing this book, one of the things that we discovered is that individuals have our life in the sense of our age, like baby boomers right now. Mm-hmm. They're actually divorcing 4 times greater than many other age groups. Mm-hmm. And the reason for it is because now the kids are gone. They're more
financially
stable. And so now that the situation that the kids are out of the picture, and they're looking at each other, what they've done is they've been living on automatic pilot all this time. Now they are disconnected, and so they're letting go. And so for us, at the base of that was our situation as well.
Now, the first time it was 7 years, it was 30 days.
Yes.
The second time, what sparked it?
It's really the same thing, because I was harboring a lot of unforgiveness, unresolved issues, things that we talked about when we decided to reconcile, that we said we were going to change and do better. I was still holding on to a lot of things. And so that second break, if you will, really was a combination of internally not having unresolved issues, but also our world around us was starting to change. The kids were getting older. We had bigger jobs. We had financial issues that came. So there were, again, pressures of life came and, created a perfect storm.
Let me ask this question. During this period of time, did you give yourselves time together?
Yeah, we actually had been doing. Yeah, we had. Oh,
you had all that.
One of the things that this is why this all kind of snuck up on us, because we were doing what most people would consider the marriage work. Mm-hmm. We were doing date night.
Right.
Even after the kids left, we were doing date night. We were vacationing, and having grand vacations, having great times and great, there was a period for 5 years that we actually lived in separate houses. And the reason for it is because she had taken a new job that actually it took her out of town. And so we literally would see each other on the weekends. And so that's where we were doing a whole lot of dating back and forth. And so for 5 years, we had a lot of conversation. And so, in fact, it got to the point where we were like, let's make sure. In fact, it kind of, the last couple of years of those 5 years, it's, now the kids are gone. Are we sure we want to do this? Mm-hmm. Do we want to, how do you feel? So we had all that behind us. And so we said, we're going to reconnect together. We're going to sell one house. We're going to move back into one house together. We're going to
build a house.
We're going to build a house together. All of that occurred. And then literally the day we moved into our home on May, and in June is when she came to me and says, I want a divorce. So it really, it's like, wait a second. Didn't we already address that? Didn't we have 2 years to talk about this?
one of the things that I want to ask you, were there underlying factors in both of your lives? Because as we talked about in the very beginning, you didn't come from a wealthy family. You didn't have a privileged life to start off with. So tell me can you mind asking you what your fears were when he was out of work?
Yeah, so I really believe that it had to do with how I grew up and my background. My parents divorced when I was pretty young. I'm the oldest, so I felt responsible for my 2 younger siblings. And we didn't have a lot growing up. There was, a little bit of child support, I suppose, but, my mom was a stay-at-home mom before my parents divorced, and so she had to find a job. And so she was underemployed, I would say. And I think for me, having a sense of financial stability was really important to me. And there were things that happened throughout the years that Reginald and I were married that sort of shook that foundation.
Right. And I think in anybody's life, mine as well as yours, that was a scary point. And so she didn't express that to you, or did you know that?
No, I did not know that. And that's something that we, as much as I tried to communicate and get her to tell me how she felt, I never got the whole story kind of thing. And what it turned out to be is a fear she had of being left destitute.
Oh.
And so every time my financial situation changed, she took that as a signal that I was going to leave her and leave her destitute. So she actually took actions to counter those things.
Oh, I get it. That's why she left. That's
always why she left.
That's why she left.
And then when she leaves, left, because you're not leaving no more.
That's all
He's chaining you. He's chaining you to that.
Yes, exactly.
Bed, whatever.
But every time that occurred, it was the reason why her actions were always similar. Like, I take the money, I take the kids, I take the this, and it was always kind of a defensive and very attackative kind of way.
Well, remember, I talked about self-preservation.
Right.
And that was a big issue.
Now I want to ask him. In your life, in your family, did you have the same feelings as she did?
As far as towards, concerns of her leaving kind of thing?
No. Concerns about how you felt when she left. Was there anything like that in your family that would make you feel the way she felt?
I had one particular situation.
Okay.
And that was, for me, something that happened to my father and mother in their relationship.
Okay.
And that was when, my father always worked at one day having a business for his kids. That was what that was his dream.
Right.
And so he did catering, and he did the limo driver after a full day's work. So I didn't really see my dad when I was growing up. So there came a time when the catering company that he worked for had the lady said she was going to retire and she wanted to sell the business to my father. And so she went to my dad, they worked out a deal, and my father only had to do one thing, which was he got a loan from the bank, and then he needed to go to my mother and asked her to sign on the line. And she refused to sign.
Oh, no.
She refused to sign because she was afraid that business would fail and he would lose the house. And so as a result, my dad never realized his dreams.
So you wanted to realize your dreams.
I wanted to realize my dreams. And everything I ever did from this high up was, I got to get my dreams. I got to get my dreams. I got to get my dreams. I got to get my dreams.
It's a goal.
It's a goal. And the other part about it is I always wanted her to be with me. So everything I did, I was doing like, okay, let's do it together. Let's do it together. Let's do it together. So here's the
partnership.
Oh yes, and early on in our marriage, we were known for being partners, and we got awards for being partners in ministry and things like that. So what I did not realize what was happening is she had stopped being my partner, but didn't tell me that the partnership was over.
Oh. And on that note, we need to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Reginald and Renea Morris in Resurrect Your Dead Marriage. There is hope.
Yes.
Right? So we'll be right back after these messages.